Hello and welcome to our 4th player education video for Pillars of Salt. As before, if you're coming from somewhere else on the internet, Pillars of Salt is an independent Vampire the Masquerade LARP operating out of Los Angeles, California, and you can find us on Facebook if you're interested in getting in contact with us. My name is Rachel and I'm the community manager for Pillars of Salt, and we're doing these videos to help our player base increase their knowledge and understanding of the setting of the World of Darkness and Vampire the Masquerade. As before, another disclaimer, this video is made with Pillars of Salt in mind and not Vampire the Masquerade in general, so there might be a few things that I say that are different to how you're used to or what you would think. That's fine, this is how we play. We've got 3 videos on the hopper so far, a history of the Camarilla, a history of the Sabbat, and a video on vampire physiology. Eventually I'm going to be able to cover all the clans, but for this video we thought it would be best to do a general how to play video. This video will contain tips, tricks, and strategies for your character getting what they want in both the Camarilla and Sabbat setting. First, we're going to address the core of a vampire's existence and examine how this core drives their motivations. That is, blood. Most vampires need to hunt around 3 to 4 times a week or risk starvation and frenzy. This requirement means that a vampire needs a safe and secure place to hunt and feed. But any worthwhile hunting ground has already been claimed by an older and more powerful vampire. So, what is a new embrace to do? The answer is, find one of those older and more powerful vampires and make yourself useful to them. This means getting drawn into that elder's web of alliances, projects, and enemies. One could, alternatively, fight to conquer and claim a territory, but you will need friends for that, allies who will need their own hunting ground. Like it or not, the need for safe feeding draws every vampire, sooner or later, into the jihad. The alternative is starvation, frenzy, torpor, and death. Young vampires want to be awarded territory by an elder. Elders want to protect what's theirs. Keep all that in mind as we go on. All of these little bits and bobs and politics and social maneuvering, it's all so your character can ultimately stay fed. First, let's cover a few general roleplay strategies. The first key to getting involved is knowing how your character fits into the general world of darkness. Read up on your clan and sect in the main rulebook, see if there's anything on the wiki, and if you can, get a hold of your clan book and read that as well. Knowing what you can do and what you can't and why is going to be your jumping off point for understanding everything else. Most clan books are quite short, averaging about 80 pages, and should only take about an hour to get through. Once you're at an event, don't be afraid to make mistakes, especially as a new player. Every new player in Pillars of Salt has a 3-month grace period. As long as you're not actively trying to diabolize the prince in open court, many of your faux pas will be gently pointed out, and you'll have the opportunity to correct any errors. So, take some risks, put yourself out there, and don't be afraid to ask questions in or out of character. As a more established player, even coming out of this grace period, still, don't feel scared to reach out and take risks. You might nevertheless fail or screw up, but even that can lead to good plot if you accept your setback with grace and good humor. Every character has a list of goals and people you know at the start. Talk to these people first. Ask about what your clan is up to and how you can help. In addition, don't be afraid to share some of what you can do. You never know when someone is looking for your exact skill set. When you spend XP, spend that in support of your character's skills. If you're designed to be a politician, spend your XP on leadership, empathy, and intimidation. If you're a fighter, put your points there. If you're a social character, focus on backgrounds. If you have a special or unique power set, focus on that, as you're likely the only person who can do that. Make sure your pools for your disciplines and defenses are good. Establish some good defensive powers. Obfuscate, Celerity, Presence, and Fortitude all have good don't kill me powers. Focus on the power you have in your clan and build up your pools. When it comes to downtimes, downtimes represent what your character is doing in between Elysia or Esbots, and how they're furthering their personal, faction, and sect goals. At minimum, you need one downtime action to feed. Herd can fill in for this downtime if you have it. If you are at a loss with what else to do, consult your leaders, Primogen, Elders, Ducti, Bishops, and ask if there is a way you can help. If they have nothing, file investigation actions, if you're really confident in other domains and territories. This will likely help involve you in the plot and give you clues as to other lines to pursue. Don't expect a single downtime to provide a solution to a complex problem. Downtimes should not be your primary avenue of engagement with the game. With downtimes, expect clues and hints you can pursue and take to other characters. It's possible you might get a long, complex scene as the result of a downtime, but it is also possible you'll get a short answer or even a null answer. Staff allows players to be wrong. If you throw downtime after downtime at a problem and nothing is changing, it may be that there is nothing there for you and your efforts are better directed elsewhere. Now we're going to focus on the status system. Though the Camarilla and Sabbat may differ on the details, the general framework remains consistent across genres. Vampires are inherently hierarchical, and status is important to establish a pecking order of who can do what to whom, and who has to shut up and do what they're told. Status is also quid pro quo. It's how the more powerful cultivate allies and underlings, and the reward those underlings receive. Those who have the ability to hand out fleeting status should be doing so at least once a month. Status breaks down into three major categories: abiding, innate, fleeting. Innate status can be positive or negative, but is more often positive and refers to an inherent quality about the vampire. In the Camarilla, every elder who was at the Convention of Thorns is due a certain amount of respect which will never be diminished. They can never not have been there. Thus, any character who is an architect of the Camarilla has the innate status of architect. In the Sabbat, since membership in both the Black Hand and the Inquisition is for unlife, and the only way to leave is in the Dustbuster, membership in either of those groups also confers innate status. Abiding status comes from holding sect office. In the Camarilla, age can be considered a sect office. Elders are quite powerful. And in the Sabbat, it's quite common for some Cainites to hold multiple offices, such as a bishop who is also a pack priest or ductus. However, a vampire can only claim abiding status from one source. This functions mechanically as well as narratively. While it's a faux pas for a neonate of the Camarilla to approach an elder without a proper introduction, if that elder is currently serving as Primogen, they must be accessible to the neonates for the clan to function. As such, an elder who is holding court office in the Camarilla should downplay their role as elder while they hold that office. Those who hold abiding status have the ability to grant fleeting status. Anyone can hold fleeting status in their sect. Fleeting status is a reward meant to be spent for specific benefits. There is job security in handing out fleeting status, for if the vampire loses the ability to grant that status, such as the prince or primogen being deposed, all the fleeting status that they have awarded vanishes. On the flip side, elders should be careful not to hand out too much status, because then the tactic becomes obvious. Some vampires also carry status bans. These could be due to clan. Gangrel are mistrusted in the Camarilla, and Assamites are mistrusted in the Sabbat, or a particular flaw. Vampires with status bans cannot hold as much fleeting status as their counterparts. Lastly comes negative status, the stick to the carrot of fleeting status. Negative status is given as punishment. Each negative status contains a time limit, anywhere from a single night up to the offender earns forgiveness, and a list of things which the vampire cannot do while the negative status remains in effect. If the vampire violates one of these prohibitions, the punishment compounds. So, in summary, innate status is rare but powerful. Abiding status is granted by sect office, and any given vampire may only claim abiding status from one source. Fleeting status is a useful reward to hand out, and officers should be doing so frequently. If you get negative status, stop digging. Now that we've covered the big picture, let's focus on each sect in turn and cover some play strategies, first in the Camarilla. The themes of the Camarilla are of vampires attempting to hold on to their humanity by pretending to be human. This is safe both for spiritual reasons, as the intention is to resist the beast, and also for more practical reasons, as the vampires hide from wary hunters. However, the politics of the Camarilla are vicious, and many kindred are forced to act against their own conscience or even their own best interests to survive. The Camarilla believes in order and stability and openly embraces nepotism. They firmly reject the so-called myth of Cain. In nights past, they even rejected the idea of the clan founders or antediluvians. Only recently have they come around to accepting that the founders exist. However, in counterpoint to the wild paranoia of the Sabbat, Camarilla leaders insist that the clan founders think of their brood with fond paternalism. The Camarilla looks down strongly on anything that even hints of Nautism, and those who talk too openly about studying Nautist lore are likely to be expunged as heretics. The Camarilla also believes in what are called the traditions, 6 major laws which all member kindred are expected to obey. Defying a tradition is worthy of execution. Boons are the functional economy of the Camarilla, and are essentially favor trading. Boons can be offered in payment, in apology, or as part of a deal. To be valid, a boon must be registered with the Harpy's office. Failure to register a boon is cause for scandal. Refusing to pay a boon, or failure to abide by the demands of a boon, can cause a kindred to become boon-broken. Boon-broken is essentially a disgraced negative status that doesn't go away until the Harpy has been appeased. Opting out of the boon economy is also scandalous, and residents of the city who neither owe nor are owed are often looked at with suspicion. It is not a faux pas to ask for a boon if you're doing something worthwhile or helpful. Everyone, especially neonates, should feel confident in asking for a boon, and kindred should be more willing than not to pay up. Now let's go over the social structure of the Camarilla. Every kindred falls into one of 3 categories based on their age and generation: neonate, ancilla, and elder. Kindred need both their age and generation to match up in order to be treated with the necessary respect and deference. If they don't have both, their social status defaults to the lesser. It should be noted that age is a function of active age. A kindred embraced in 1917, but who had spent 75 years in torpor, would still be treated as a neonate until they'd gotten the necessary 50 years of experience with vampire society. In the Camarilla, the general strategy is to get involved in a client-patron relationship. A neonate working for their primogen, an ancilla working for a court officer, or an elder with a powerful mentor are all examples of how to get involved at this level. Even elders are looking for a powerful patron, for there are always bigger sharks in the sea. Neonates are kindred of 11th generation or higher, and who have spent less than 50 years as an active kindred. Since many new embraces often crumble under the pressure of being a vampire and self-destruct, neonates as a whole are mistrusted until they can prove they are trustworthy and stable. In addition, learning how to navigate the complex social and legal systems of the Camarilla takes a while. No one believes that a neonate fully knows what they're doing until they're about 50 years old. The overall goal for a neonate is to prove themselves helpful and of sound judgment. A neonate's story in the Camarilla will always be one of the underdog, for even the most talented and adept neonate has an upward ceiling of achievement in the Camarilla. Yet a neonate's inherent weakness is also their greatest strength. Their weak blood and close memories of human life mean they are more flexible and dynamic, and have an easier time dealing with mortals. As a result, neonates get backgrounds and skills for much cheaper. As a neonate, focus on being the Alfred to someone's Batman. Collect influences, cultivate contacts, farm retainers, and sharpen your skills. Find ancilla and elders who can make use of what you can do, and trade your abilities for patronage. A neonate who does this will almost always thrive. Once a young vampire of sufficiently powerful blood, 10th generation or better, has survived their first 50 years, they are regarded as an ancilla. They're probably not going to fall to pieces under the strain of being a vampire, and they likely have a few small successes and pleased elders in their history. Ancilla carry the status confirmed, but many ancilla are well suited to most court roles, especially that of primogen. An ancilla serving this function enjoys higher status than they would as simply confirmed, and an ancilla in this position is most likely acting as a representative of their clan under the leadership and direction of an elder. Ancilla should be proactive in cultivating relationships with elders and court officers. They should also take the time to cultivate relationships with neonates and serve as the bridge between the elders and the neonates. An elder has a project he or she wants to get done and taps the reliable ancilla for support. The ancilla turns to their neonate friends and organizes them to accomplish the elder's aims. The elder awards status and boons, and everyone walks away happy. Lastly come the elders, those of 8th generation or better, and who have been active for at least 300 years. Elders of the Camarilla are due respect and deference for their age. However, that respect and deference does come at some cost. While a neonate can and should happily volunteer for every dangerous mission in an attempt to prove themselves, elders must remain off to the sides. Instead of getting involved in the night-to-night, elders should focus on the big picture. Elders should devise long-term projects for the entire clan to work on. Cultivating a new Elysium, getting a lock on a particular sphere of influence, or ensuring territory secure against enemies are some examples of these projects. So, for an elder, the trick is getting people to work for you. You have status to offer and boons as well. In addition, the promise of patronage. Offer to step in and help your underlings when they get into trouble. Paper over scandals and make mistakes go away. Elders should be reluctant to take most court positions, as the status they get is often not worth what they have to give up. Elders should especially be wary of taking military titles such as Sheriff, Scourge, or Dux Bellorum. One failure in the field could mean the end of an elder's career. Better, instead, to cultivate an ancilla for the job and have them report to you. Cultivate advisors who can fill you in on courtly gossip and tell you what's going on. Always make sure you have an escape hatch, a way out, or someone to throw under the bus. Within the Camarilla, blood bonding one's underlings is a perfectly acceptable way of ensuring loyalty. Elders should not be afraid to impose the bond, and ancilla, and especially neonates, should grudgingly accept this as the price of protection. In addition to the client-patron relationship is the coterie relationship. Coteries are small groups of kindred who come together for mutual interest and support. A kindred who has received a heavy task by his or her elder can turn to their fellow coterie members for assistance. Most common among neonates, some ancilla also join coteries. Few elders do. Now, what to do if you make a mistake? If it's a small mistake, offer whomever you've offended a boon, and be generous. Trivial boons cover most small faux pas, but if you really put your foot in it, offer a minor boon, or even a major one. If a boon isn't good enough to cover what you've done and you receive negative status, accept the negative status with grace, and endure its prohibitions until the status expires. As long as you're not boon broken, you only have to bear that status for, at most, 2 games. Once you come back humble and helpful and ready to prove that you're not going to make the same mistake again. If you behave this way, most kindred will forget about your mistake within a few months. Lastly, a few notes on some mechanical aspects of play. A somewhat regularly appearing merit in the Camarilla is Machiavellian Prodigy. This is a graduated merit in Pillars of Salt, and can fill in some gaps where needed. For instance, an 11th generation vampire who is 100 years old can purchase Machiavellian Prodigy, so she is treated like an ancilla and not a neonate. A 9th generation vampire who is 20 years old can also purchase this merit to be treated like an ancilla. And a truly brilliant neonate or ancilla can be treated as if they are of an entirely different social class. This merit has no value for elders, and there's no reason for them to buy it. Now we move on to the Sabbat. While the Camarilla hides their monstrosity, the Sabbat revels in it. Instead of controlling their beast by denying it, the Sabbat pursues paths of enlightenment as a way to hang on to their sense of self. The Sabbat believes in their inherent superiority to humanity, and that it is their divine right to rule. They are also extremely paranoid. The machinations of the antediluvians are in everything, and the Vaulderie is the only way to stay safe. The Rite of the Vaulderie is the core on which the Sabbat is built, and denying the Vaulderie is tantamount to denying Cain. After coming into contact with non-Sabbat vampires, many Cainites will seek out a Vaulderie just to be safe. The Sabbat also functions quite a lot like a religion. In lieu of the traditions, the Sabbat follow a document called the Code of Milan, which guides them legally, and the Book of Nod, which guides them spiritually. Heresy is of prominent concern to the Sabbat, and many a military operation has been derailed by accusations of sedition and heresy. The Sabbat is much more direct and proactive, preferring a direct attack than using mortals and backgrounds. The Sabbat does not function with a boon economy. However, Sabbat frequently promise favors to each other in exchange for service. A Sabbat who gives their word in this manner must come through on that. Sabbat who have disputes with each other settle their disagreements via the rite of monomacy, a ritual combat where each participant risks status, sanctuary, or their very own life to seek Cain's favor and settle the matter. The Sabbat claims to make no distinction based on age. As a meritocracy, even someone who would be considered a neonate in the Camarilla can ascend to Priscus, Archbishop, or even Regent if they are talented and lucky enough. As such, the client-patron relationship is not as prevalent in the Sabbat as it is in the Camarilla. However, some pack may still find a powerful figure to serve in exchange for protection. Turnover in the Sabbat is much more energetic than in the Camarilla, however, so a pack would do well not to put all of their eggs in one basket. The Sabbat are pack first. Despite any differences in political or non-heretical religious opinion, the Vaulderie is usually strong enough to overcome these disagreements within a pack. Even when it does come to heretics, packs with a consistent vinculum 5 to each other may be tempted to cover for any revealed heretic in their ranks. Packs often have a focus or a common goal. Some may be war packs and unite to fight, others may be packs devoted to study or some other more long-term goal. A few rare packs are Inquisition. Some packs may be dedicated to supporting a member who happens to be a leader. Packs have some stability, but are not as rigidly formed as Camarilla clans. Members can change packs as their story develops. There are several factions in the Sabbat: the ultra-conservatives, the orthodox, the loyalists, the Order of St. Blaise, and the moderates. I won't go into detail about what each faction believes, you can check out the Sabbat video for that, but here are some playstyle tips for members of each faction. As an ultra-conservative, your main focus is on the military missions of the Sabbat. Prepare for Gehenna, take out the antediluvians when they rise. An ultra-conservative will want to ensure that everyone in their pack, or even diocese, has at least some amount of combat training. An ultra-conservative leader likely wants to hold many games of instinct the way a mortal military holds training exercises. Ultra-conservatives are likely to punish disobedience and insubordination very harshly, but on the flip side are the faction most in favor of cross-pack Vaulderies. As Cainites of a more religious bent, orthodox characters should be pushing all of the Rite, not merely the Vaulderie, especially sermons of Cain, games of instinct, the high holidays, and other ways to demonstrate and cultivate faith. An orthodox member likely also has some religious thoughts on their path of enlightenment, should they be on one. For a loyalist, You can directly defy any order given to you by a member of the clergy, though not the Black Hand Inquisition or Priscus Council. Demand that any clergy account for themselves and explain how their orders and plans support the mission of the Sabbat. Remember that the Code of Milan and the Book of Nod are as important to you as any other Sabbat, but rely on your personal interpretation more than what the clergy wants you to believe. As a member of the Order of St. Blaise, you likely have willingly avoided getting onto a path of enlightenment and retained your humanity in order to better serve the sect. Due to this, you likely have some coping mechanisms to help you keep your beast at bay. Like Camarilla NEONATES, you will be the perpetual underdog, but a damn useful one. Cultivate that usefulness by building up your backgrounds, especially retainers if your function is maintaining revenants. If you're not part of any of these factions, you're a moderate, one of those not strongly invested in the political process. You appreciate the rite and do as your ductus and priest bid you without any strong beliefs one way or the other. Either moderates care little for politics in general, or you are extremely political and can see the value in all stances. Most of the Sabbat are on paths of enlightenment. The sect looks down on those who are not. There's not enough time to go into each permutation of a path, but study yours for tips on how to roleplay. What does your character value? What does your character hate? What does your character feel? Seek out those who share your same path. Vauldery with them or perform sermons of King together. At the core, Sabbat should be more proactive. If you're bored at a Sabbat event, get a rite going. Spend your XP on more direct actions, disciplines, and combat skills. Demand action and accountability from your leaders. If they do something you're displeased with, monomacy is always an option. If you make a mistake in the Sabbat, offering a boon and apology is obviously not a strategy. You can, however, offer to undergo a rite of contrition. When this happens, someone, probably your ductus or bishop, will set a particular task or ban on you. Once you complete this task or carry out the demands of the ban, you have successfully completed your rite of contrition, and no one can bring up your failure again without insulting whoever handled that rite. Negative status is also a possibility in the Sabbat, and functions much the same way as negative status elsewhere. Lastly, I want to talk about something which doesn't get a ton of attention, but certainly deserves discussion. Bleed. Shortly put, bleed is when you feel feelings which aren't your own. When your character is happy that they've achieved a goal, and you feel actual happiness, that's bleed. Bleed can be a positive experience and is why many players continue to come to events. Bleed doesn't necessarily even tie into LARP. Remember how shocked you were at the Red Wedding in the Game of Thrones? How all the characters you were so invested in were suddenly and brutally murdered? That was a normal response to getting invested in a creative work. And Bleed in a LARP is roughly the same, but made more intense due to the level of personal and emotional involvement which LARP requires. Bleed is what creates those truly memorable experiences, which we remember and talk about long after the event has passed. Bleed, though, can also be negative. If you're deposed, ousted, or even killed, it can be hard to draw a line between this is happening to my character and this is happening to me. Or even, another character is doing this to my character, and my friend is doing this to me. Sometimes a scene can contain material which brings back memories of traumas past, and that can also provoke negative bleed. Since positive bleed is one of the goals of LARP in general, negative bleed will always be its darker cousin, and will always need to be a thing to be managed. Here are some strategies to manage your negative bleed when it happens. First, work on drawing a mental line between you and your character. Often, players use me and my as shorthand for when they speak of their characters. If you worry that negative bleed is a risk for you, focus on using language which clarifies the boundary between you and your character. Deliberately adopt diction, body language, and attitudes which are not yours. If you're a bleeding heart liberal, play a devoted conservative, or vice versa. Always remember that your character deals with the beast, while you, the player, do not, and let that factor into deciding how you roleplay. Also, establish rituals to use when getting in and out of character. Many players have certain costuming or makeup or accessory rituals which help them get into their character's headspace. The act of putting on the clothes or the hats or the makeup helps them become someone else, while the ritual of getting out of costume and washing the makeup off helps the player reground themselves. Have some people with whom you can speak. Pillars of Salt maintains a community office for this purpose, but also reach out to your trusted friends and talk about your experiences with bleed. Figure out what you're feeling and why. Sometimes knowing why you feel a thing can help you process it that much faster. And at the last, don't be afraid to take a break. Step away for a scene, an hour, a game, a month, and recenter. We'll still be here when you're ready to come back. Once you know you have a handle on negative bleed, you will have formed a psychological boundary, and you can more easily explore the darker themes of the World of Darkness and take only the positive parts from the experience. And that's it for this video. I know this was a long one, so thank you for watching with me to the end, and I'll see you at the next video, where I will finally start to cover each of the clans.